crazy mother. What's going on, everyone? Nicholas Nat, and you are tuned in to the NattFitness Method. I want to thank you guys for stopping by today because this is going to be an exceptionally incredible message with my guest here. Now, for those of you who've never joined us, I invite you and say thank you for giving us your time. And for those of you who are returning, as you guys all know, this platform is really designed to help you maximize your life potential. So wherever you find yourself in life, moving through the ditches and moving through adversity, this podcast is really designed to help you guys maximize your strategies and your efforts so that way you can have an easier time crossing the road from point A, where you are, to point B, exactly where it is you're trying to go. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest. Not only is she highly known as one of the pioneer athletes here in Denver, Colorado for CrossFit, but she's also made 2 visits with her team to the CrossFit Games and is now working on an attendance as a solo athlete. But she's also learned the definition of serious commitment and hard work, not only excelling at a very early age in academia by becoming valedictorian of her high school, but also showing that you can be a strong collegiate athlete, first excelling in academics and also being able to hold a full-time schedule as a Division I swimmer. Since then, she's found herself moving through the ranks, and she attributes a lot of her success to the pioneer starting of training with her father. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest, Kelly Stone. Kelly, thank you so much for coming in.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So you have quite the resume here. You're kind of just the quote-unquote go-getter.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Awesome. So I want to dive into a little bit of this start, and just how you became this kind of amazing inspiration all the way around as an athlete. You grew up here in Denver, Colorado, and you lifted weights with your dad, which was kind of just a very unique thing for women to be doing, but also at an early age. So talk to me a little bit about how that got started and how you fostered that relationship.
Yeah. So, I started, when people ask me like, well, when did you start your fitness journey? And, I always say like, I kind of walked out of the womb, doing fitness. Like I was primarily an athlete growing up, started competitive gymnastics at age 4 and was quickly training 4 to 5 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week doing that. I also started competitive swimming around age 6. And so was kind of throwing that into the mix, and so from a very early age was really, focused and, goal setting and really committing, a lot of my childhood to competing at a high level in these sports. And then when I kind of transitioned into high school, I decided to participate in high school sports, gymnastics and swimming, as well as, the club versions of those. And part of that, just involved starting to do some strength training with my dad. I started lifting weights when I was like 14 years old, and this actually really famous bodybuilding gym here in Denver, Armbrust Pro Gym. But back in the days before that even existed, it was Colorado Pro Gym. And so, I was probably about the only 14-year-old girl in there, learning how to lift weights. But, I loved it from the start. And it's something that, I've incorporated in various ways ever since.
Awesome. Well, obviously, that was a great platform because you were able to get a little bit of education. I'm assuming your dad is quite the mechanic specialist. And so you're not only learning how to lift correctly, which a lot of people don't do. When I started lifting weights, and I think around high school, even middle school, I lifted from my dad, and fortunately he taught me well, but there's a lot of people who just didn't have that. And so having that at an early age is obviously a huge advantage. But I think that you had touched on a big part about gymnastics and putting that level of a commitment in an early age. It just kind of sets you up for this mentality. And that carried you through not just in what you were doing in sports, but also in academia. So in high school, you were valedictorian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, my parents were always, very supportive, but they emphasized the importance of academics just as much as athletics. And so, I knew, not only did I need to not only did I need to do well in school to also be able to participate in sports, but, it went even further than that. It was like something that, I kind of got from them and then just kind of, internalized it and made it this personal mission to, just not be known as like the dumb jock, like everyone knew me for my athletics, especially in high school. But I also I wanted to be known for being smart too. And I wanted to show that like, hey, you can be a good athlete and you can also be smart. And it doesn't mean you have to be super nerdy. Like, like you can do it all if you prioritize, and set your mind to it. And I think, really just committing to doing, especially gymnastics that early for so many hours a day, I just learned a lot of those valuable time management skills and just how to prioritize, the things that were most important to me to be able to reach those goals.
Well, I want to touch on a question about how you're able to balance that, because I know swimming was such a huge part of that, but we'll get into that more excelling in college. One question off the top of my head that I really want to throw in there is, how vital do you attribute a lot of your success in the framework and building to your parents and your relationship with them, and them being incredibly supportive at whatever you did? Because I think you mentioned that your parents showed up to a lot of your events and things like that, were always really supportive, not just with their words, but with their actions.
Yeah, I always say, even to this day, like my parents are my biggest fans. They always have been, and they always will be, no matter what I wanted to do, even if it was expensive or, across the country or whatever required, if I said that I wanted to do it and would commit to the training, they would find a way to make it work. So, they were there. My mom would drive me to every practice, and, they would fly with me to compete all over the country and do all of these things. And, I'm so thankful, to have that just unwavering support and just, people to fall back on. And they've motivated me so much just to kind of pursue my goals and, do everything. And so I laugh because even now, I was recently on the new season of Titan Games. And of course, my parents, flew out there. They were there cheering for me in the stands. And I remember after my, the first event, and I just like look up and got done. And it's such an emotional experience, just all of it. And I just like look over and I see my parents, and my mom's crying, and then I'm crying. And it's just, just to have that support. I think it's something that unfortunately a lot of people maybe don't have in their lives, and something that I'm so, so thankful for.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. So thanks for bringing that in there. I always want to throw that in, because whether a person is a parent or whether they're going to be a parent, they're a parent to be, or just a role model in a young person's life, it's great to see the value of that impact. Okay. So I want to jump up to your collegiate years and really talk about, what this was like, because one of the fascinating concepts that I always touch on is that a person can see someone like you, right, from the outside in, and they see, the muscle tone, and they see, the credential behind the name, and they know that you put in a lot of work. But I think also with that, what they do is they make that comparison, right? Maybe even at an unconscious level. And that comparison is like, I don't have what she has, and she's probably way more advanced, and I can't do that. And so a lot of times I think what happens is that people attribute that to like some sort of divinity, like she's got it made, or she was destined for greatness, and I couldn't reach that if I wanted to, even younger people. And so the reason I'm so excited talking about your collegiate years, because there's so much in there from the outside, but then there was like even twice as much going on from the inside. So you did swim in San Diego, right, for undergrad, your whole 4 years in college. Talk to me a little bit about what that was like swimming, but not so how you got started, just what it was like kind of going forward and managing a full-time schedule as a student, but also a full-time schedule as an athlete again.
Yeah. So, mostly growing up, I focused on gymnastics, but I just knew once I got into my high school years that I really wanted to give college something a try. And it was something that I had never, just put all of my energy into. And so I just thought like, hey, if I can really commit to this and just, focus on this in school, like I wonder how much better I can get. And so, honestly, one of my biggest, accomplishments to me personally is just finding my way and really fighting my way onto a Division I swim team. Because I spent a lot of time kind of jumping back and forth in high school between gymnastics and swimming, I quite honestly was kind of on that cusp where, a lot of Division I coaches were just flat out like, hey, you're not fast enough for my team. And I kept trying to say like, hey, just give me that opportunity. I've never trained full time, like give me a chance. And so, I kind of really had to fight for that. And that's something that I'm proud of, because I did happen to find a coach that was, willing to take a chance on me and, just kind of give me a shot. So, I think just because of that, it gave me, just a sense of, admiration for having that opportunity, and I didn't want to waste it. So, but just as in high school, academics was really important. It also was going to be super important for me in college, because at that point in my life, I was planning on going to medical school. So, I immediately started it off in a biology pre-med degree. I was volunteering in a hospital every week, making sure that I was staying on track with those things, while also training full-time as a Division I college athlete. And, I would argue that, swimmers put more time in than a lot of other even collegiate sports, because it just requires so much yardage, double practices most days, a lot of extra, running and conditioning and weight work, so I quickly had to, figure out my priorities, figure out and manage my time management, across the entire time, just to be able to, get by in doing those things. And, in doing so, I think, it kind of limits the amount of time that you're able to maybe quote unquote be part of that college experience. But for me, the biggest pieces of that were to be successful in school and in swimming. So those were just sacrifices that I made to be able to do those things.
Well, I think it's awesome that you basically touched on, and again, for those of you who didn't really catch on to this part, we tend to think that, most athletes are going to be recruited and to have a very exciting or explosive career, especially at the Division I level. There's got to be recruitment involved. And so you weren't scouted. You basically begged the coach and you were minded to put in the hours and then earned your spot. And so I like to let people know that, because from the outside looking in, they just see the title, but there was a process involved in that. Okay. So I want to circle back about your time spent, spending hours with the doctors at the hospital and where that led into your future. But, as a whole, many people know, with the undergrad experience comes, the social adequacy, right? Getting a chance to go out, connecting with boys, connecting with girls, being able to go out to parties, having experiences, things like that. And so, you were able to have so much fun, but with that also comes this level of independence. You don't have your parents breathing down your neck, or maybe that same support system. And now you're thrown in with a bunch of strangers. You're at the age of 18. So how are you able to go from being at home to now setting up shop in San Diego to just like homework, and then now, basically doing an internship, and then full-time, training. And when you have spare time, you're training, and you don't really have the opportunity like a lot of these other kids that are going out. How did you really deal with that? Because they're assuming there had to be some hardships, there had to be breakdowns and difficulties, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I made the decision to go out of state for college because I really wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone. And, like you said, I grew up with very supportive families, that was my comfort zone. And I was a pretty shy kid growing up and even all through high school. And so I saw this as like my opportunity just to kind of push myself, like completely move to a new state where I know absolutely nobody and just kind of start fresh. So, that was kind of where it started. But like you're mentioning, I definitely had my fair share of mental breakdowns and emotional stress, because at any given time, you've got, just so much pressure on you, placed by other people and also myself, wanting to be the best version of myself in all of these different things. And so, if, there were times where you're saying like, okay, well, do I prioritize sleep so that my training is better tomorrow? Or do I prioritize studying so that I do better on my test tomorrow? And, those were things that I constantly just had to juggle and balance and make the best decision in any given, any given time. But I think what really helped me so much in that time, and I honestly had had a phenomenal college experience, but was just being surrounded by, a group of women that also swam with me and who were pursuing, excuse me, really advanced degrees as well. And so, just having that camaraderie and, just support from somebody else, just that I knew was doing the exact same thing as I was and, going through those same struggles. I think that, that helped kind of lessen the load. And then I just, we had a good time. We did fun things, but, it wasn't to the extent that a lot of kids, probably do in college. Like I had 7 a.m. morning practice on Saturday mornings. So, that obviously kind of shifts what your Friday nights look like and what those experiences look like. But, for me, I've just always been so driven and passionate about competing at a high level, no matter what I'm doing. So for me, that ultimately outweighed, some of those other experiences that, maybe would be fun in the moment, but not quite as long lasting as what I gained through swimming.
So I'm hearing a couple things in that. And, the first one's really kind of almost like a subliminal message is that you were very clear on your vision, yep. Even at the age, early age, and when you're going through adolescence and entering early adulthood. A lot of people, especially in college, you hear that constantly with like people switching majors or people going in undeclared. You had laser sharp focus with exactly what you wanted to do. And that's why I think that helps in being clear and having made that decision and truly understanding through your life that you know the rules to commitment. But also, like you said, surrounding yourself. And I think that's the second point with very like-minded people. And a lot of times, how can someone really understand what you're going through if they don't have the understanding of what you're going through? And so being surrounded around other athletes, I think is great. And so it kind of taps into the old adage of who you surround yourself with is who you become. And like so many people really that up, because it's about fun. It's that conflict of, well, I know I should be doing this, but this is what I feel like doing in the emotion. So a lot of your success is future based and not so short-term based. Okay. So I like that. I like the message behind that. So talk to me a little bit about, you swam for 4 years and, you're kind of, getting ready to enter medical school. But at this time you were showing up to clinics and you're doing your rounds and you sort of had this awakening, right? Kind of revealing sight to you. Talk to me a little bit about that. Your whole life has been planned, medical school, collegiate athlete, and then boom, this happened. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I kind of jokingly think about it now as like my quarter life crisis, but like you said, like I was that girl that had a plan and I went after it. And, it was a very scary realization for me when I just had this epiphany moment my junior year where I said, I don't know that I actually want to go to medical school. Like I was so put off by a lot of the interactions that I had with physicians and surgeons and, not because of anything they were inherently doing, but just the nature of the career and the limited time that they had to interact with patients. Like a lot of times it just seemed like it was, a 5-minute interaction and that was it. Or, they would jokingly kind of talk about, people in surgery, like a piece of meat on the table. And, I think, there's just certain ways, if that's your profession, that you have to kind of distance yourself to be able to do your job effectively. So, it's nothing negative on that profession, but I just realized that I wanted to be on the more holistic side of medicine and be able to actually engage and interact and build connections with my patients and be able to positively impact them, beyond just, prescribing medications and putting them under the knife. Like I wanted to kind of, be on that other side. So at the time, though, it seemed like such a huge deal. And I was, just terrified. Like, this is what I've always thought I was going to do. And this is what I always thought I should do. And when I realized that maybe that was all just built up in my head as exactly that, what I thought I should do and not what I actually wanted to do, that I like totally, had a mental breakdown and had to completely just, break down the layers and start from scratch. So ultimately, it led me to physical therapy, which, isn't drastically different, but I think a much better fit for me overall. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to touch on the physical therapy work that you do now. I think it's pretty important, but I think this is also something worth mentioning because, we have this common ethos of, going to college and parents wanting you to follow in their footsteps and seeing that as the holy grail to success and even using it as a plan B, right? And your parents had always supported everything you'd done. You kind of look up to them and you look for that validation, as everyone really does. And here you are, your junior year, getting ready to graduate. It's about time to start applying. And you're like, I don't know if I want to do this. And so talk to me about when you let your parents know, because I think that so many individuals have lived their life or are going to live their life if they're in undergrad, really predicated around what their parents think. And there can be a lot of fear around that when you're choosing a career, right? Whether it's because it's not enough monetarily or if it's because people are conflicted between finding a stable career versus pursuing a passion. And so talk to me about when you confronted your parents and kind of what was going through your mind and how are you able to nurture that?
Yeah. So, exactly what you're saying. Like I had this built up, impression in my head of just, letting my parents down so much if I told them I didn't want to do this. And I vividly remember, that conversation where I'm, crying, sitting outside the library, called my mom to finally tell her, hey, I don't want to go to medical school. And I honestly don't know what I was expecting. Like it just in my head, I had built it up so much. And I just remember her saying like, it's okay. You don't have to. And it was like immediately a weight had been lifted off my chest, if I said, hey, I'm just going to drop out of school and, go live on the streets, she'd probably be a little concerned, but, she knew that they raised me well and I was going to find something else. But just to like hear that, reassurance of like, hey, you don't have to do that, and I think I realized then that it was much more pressure I had put on myself than even pressure that they had put on me. It was just this whole picture I had built up in my head. So, I think having their support once again, that has never wavered, really gave me the courage to take a step back and pursue other interests and really figure out what I was passionate about.
Very cool. Very cool. So, we have this platform of, parents' influence, you at an early age, trying to excel at whatever you do, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. And it's laid this just basic platform for CrossFit. Now, CrossFit is obviously your passion. You live and breathe, CrossFit now. So in postgrad in Florida, you join a gym and you end up having the opportunity to go and figure out that this is exactly what you were going to do. And then you graduate. So you've already started that little bit of connection, into CrossFit, and that this is definitely for you. Talk to me about why you chose to move back to Colorado and what happened when you joined CrossFit Omnia.
Yeah. So I graduated April 16 and, I thought about it a lot and I loved my experience in Florida, but ultimately I grew an appreciation for Colorado after I left it for a while, which I think happens a lot. And so I just decided, I wanted to move back, make some better financial decisions in terms of paying off my loans. So moved back into my parents' house just to pay off some debt. And, once I decided that was what I wanted to do, I immediately started looking up gyms in the Denver area to see, where might be a good fit for me to improve. And so, I sought out CrossFit Omnia specifically because they were competing at a high level. That was the first year they had qualified as a team to go to regionals. And then very quickly after I moved to Denver and started going there, they qualified to go to the games for the first time. And so, for me, I'm always someone where I want to be pushed. I want to get to that next step. And so, I didn't want to go to a tiny gym where I would be the best in the gym. Like that's not going to help me get better and meet my goals. So, I found a gym where there were good people to train with, good coaches, and specifically good women that would challenge me to get better. And so that's how I ended up at CrossFit Omnia.
Awesome. So there's a defining moment, as you join this gym, and this team, as you had mentioned, is already very successful. They've been to the games. So you join and actually go out to, was it California? Am I right?
Yep.
California, and you get a chance to sit in the stands. So talk to me about that experience of being in the stands, being immersed in this culture that is, completely captivating. You cultivated your life around it, and now you're watching people that you trained with at the gym, and it's like vivid for the first time. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So, I just on a whim made that decision to go out there and see them compete. I had only been at the gym for, I think, 2 months maybe before the games. And so I was like, I just want to go and see what this is all about. And, from the moment I walked in that arena and saw people competing, I knew right then and there that I wanted to be there. And I set a goal right then and there that I was going to be on that team next year. And that, really just catapulted me forward. I really set that concrete goal, and it just formulated my structure of training and motivation for that entire next year. So it was another one of those like defining moments for me.
So what I'm really fascinated about, and this is, I guess, a you question, how do you take something that you see, right? Because I think so many of us can be inspired in the moment, right? Like we see that thing and we don't know that like the garden that we're trying to pursue is protected by this giant dragon, and it's got claws and it's got fangs and it's got fire breathing. And then there's like this forever never ending bridge that's like got all these squeaks in it and it's a fall to your death, right? Like that's reality. So how are you able to make a decision in your head that's based on the commitment and then see that through, knowing that there's going to be hardships? Because I think it just seems like so many people get excited about a goal and then emotionally, psychologically, life happens and they just lose steam. And then before you know it, it's like, it's a wrap, it's just, it's a cat's idea.
Yeah. So I think, something I've realized for myself is that I function best when I have both short and long-term goals. So, that long-term goal I set, hey, I'm going to be at the games here next year, but what does that actually mean? And I think that's where people fall short of, how am I actually going to plan to get there? So, for me, I set very specific goals in terms of, the amount of time I was going to dedicate to training, dedicating time to working on weaknesses, seeking out opportunities to improve and compete, and, really make sure that I was putting everything that I possibly could into, earning my spot on that team. Because, I think it's funny because once, I started to kind of spend some time there, for a while, I feel like other members on the team they were a little like, who's this girl coming in? What's she trying to do? Steal my spot? And, I was kind of like, yeah, but I'm going to earn it. I'm not stealing anything. Like I'm going to earn my spot on this team next year. And so I think it took a while for me to kind of earn that respect from them. But to me, it didn't really, matter. I set my goals. I committed to my training and, fortunately had that experience, both with gymnastics and that training schedule, and then my college training schedule as well as grad school. So by the time I kind of got to this professional aspect of my life, like, yes, I was working full time, but I still was prioritizing, fitness just as much. And so, I think that can be really hard for people if you've never had that or had to do that in other parts of your life. If you just went to college and just did college, like that's great, but it's not necessarily going to prepare you or be a super easy transition into, hey, maybe you need to train 2 to 3 hours a day plus work full time. And some people go, well, I don't have that much time in the day. And it's like, I would argue we make time for what's most important to us. And if there's a will, there's a way. But, ultimately it's about being efficient, figuring out what you need to work on to get better, and setting those very specific goals to kind of keep you on track to get there.
I like it. What I like in particular about what you're saying is sort of this parallel. Now, I think so many people will miss that because of this comparison like concept, right? And so they're like, listen, you were a little girl doing gymnastics 4 hours. Your parents must have been insane. And now, you went to college, you balanced a full time at like, this is second nature to you, which really it is. That's kind of what you're saying. But I think that a lot of people miss the gambit of just how much sacrifice you make. And so before I make this point about this, relation between having a vivid goal, making the sacrifices with your day-to-day life, like day-to-day life is still going on, but then simultaneously you're putting in and allocating specific hours. Talk to me a little bit about some of the sacrifices and disciplines you make. So the CrossFit Open, right? The WODs open up, and then basically it's, here in Colorado, and then it goes to regionals. And then when you top perform, it's, this selection process and you found your way into. How were you between your training, between things that you cut out in your diet, between things that you put into your diet? What sort of sacrifices and disciplines that you have to implement in order to get basically is that good, right?
Yeah. So, I think, even to this day, a lot of people, think about that social time that they have, that really for me is pretty minimal even to this day. I love to go out and do things with friends, but my friends that really know me know that if you want to see me during the week, you can come to the gym, and otherwise I'll try to find time to see you on the weekend. But, going out on a Thursday night or even a Friday night is just usually not an option for me. It's just something that isn't a priority. And, for me, I have realized that taking care of my body as a whole is something that's super, super critical to my success. So I prioritize sleep above all else. Like, that is the single best recovery tool for me. If I don't get 8 hours of sleep plus consistently, like, I'm a train wreck. So, if that means that I'm, going to bed early and giving up TV time or going out with friends, like, that's what happens. And, during that year was when I really started to, learn about nutrition and sought out a nutrition coach to help me get on track and figure out what I needed to do to fuel my body to perform, not necessarily just lose weight or anything like that. It was like, how can we maximize your performance? So, nutritionally, I was focused, I was drinking enough water, I was sleeping enough, and then just being very focused and intentional with my training. So, I always say, like, you're always going to have people in any given thing that they may have the structure in their life to be able to dedicate more time to it than you. So, there are full-time CrossFitters, and, I can sit here all day and, complain about how, well, they have all day to train and I only have 3 hours, or I can make the best of those 3 hours and, be super efficient and do the best that I can. And ultimately, like, that's what I've chosen to do. But yeah, you've got to realize that, it's easy to look at the end result and, see that and be like, oh, that looks like it fell into her lap. But if you really look at the day in and the day out and the amount of training that I put in and the things that I gave up, you really see that sacrifice. And I don't regret it. But, I do, constantly like to remind people that, I've worked hard for everything that I've accomplished in my life. Like, nothing was handed to me. I had, great supportive parents. I had a lot of opportunities, and I'm extremely thankful for that. But I've worked hard for everything that I've accomplished.
Awesome. So, in that, when you're connecting with your nutrition coach, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I bodybuild, and, I'd say 90%, if not more, of it's nutrition and rest. Like, the training piece is fun, but it's not that it's not important. It's just that in the long term, how you're going to perform, how you're going to think, your ability to be lethargic, all of that is a chess match, and it starts, here and here. And so you made that commitment to do that, cut out those daily, liberties and things that you enjoy, to push yourself. And again, for anybody who, doesn't understand what that's like, it catches you after a while. It's not so much that you want to binge on Cheetos and Goldfish and cookies, but every once in a while, you want to get a thing of frozen yogurt, and it's like drinking, you had cut out drinking during your whole preparation for the Open, right? So I think my question for you would be, what would you say, Kelly, to the individual, man or woman, who works and they have a goal, right? Like, I want to get my summer body, it's now May, it's almost June, and, summer's around the corner. We're in quarantine. They're kind of tired of sitting on the couch and self-loathing and comforting through the foods and things like that. So for individuals who are getting up and going to work and they may not have that background, they don't have that structure of supportive parents, or they don't have a community around them of people who are super ambitious. And for them, the knack of waking up, going to work all day, listening to, coworkers they may not connect with, or a boss they may not like, and then compromising their time of their sanctuary time, their happiness time at home, to go put in work in a gym. Like what would be the advice that you would give to somebody on basically where to start and then how to take that to scale so that they can be committed? Because it's such a hard thing, and so many people know that they should do it, but it's like, they just lose steam, and then they see you and they're like, there's no way I can do what she does. Right. So what would be your advice to someone like that?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to first focus on your why, and I recently started doing some nutrition coaching and pursued that other credential because like you mentioned, that nutrition piece is so important, and it couples, so nicely with, the PT work that I do, as well as, fitness stuff. And, but one of my first questions that I always ask clients is like, why do you want to do this? Like, what's your motivation behind it? Because, that's super, super important. If you're someone where you just want to, maybe get to a certain weight so that other people see you differently or something like that, like, quite honestly, that's not strong enough. Like, you need something more substantial. If you're doing it so that you feel better every day and it's something that you want to do for yourself, or so that you can, do a race or compete in a show or do something like that, I think that's much stronger than just having this like arbitrarily, I need to get in shape. Like, it's just to me, it's going to falter because, you're going to be starting, something completely new, and you need to take time to develop those habits. And so, number one, having that strong why is going to be critically important. And then once you figure out your why, it's how to progressively, use goal setting to build, consistent daily habits. And, I think it's really easy for people to just want to go from 0 to 100. And so they say, hey, I haven't worked out all in the last 2 months, but I'm going to start working out 7 days a week, and I'm going to eat super healthy and no sugar and no carbs or whatever it is. And it's just too much. Like, they're doomed to failure because there's no way that you can make that, extreme of a change overnight. Like, yes, I may do things that seem very far away from you, but like, it also was an incremental kind of step process in my journey. So,
Right.
Yeah. So,
Right.
I would people like pick one thing, start with that. Once you're consistent with it, then you can add something else. So maybe that's working out once a week or twice a week, which you may not think is a big deal, but if you work out twice a week for a year compared to not working out at all, like, you're going to see huge progress, so it's about taking those, consistent pieces, building those habits, to get towards your goals. And then I think the other kind of third component of that is just finding something that you enjoy. I do CrossFit every day because I love it, and nobody makes me be there. I'm not doing it for anybody else. Like, I'm strong and I like to compete and do all these things for myself and nobody else. So I think, it's about finding whatever that means to you. Maybe that's weight training, maybe it's yoga, like, it doesn't matter. But I promise you, if you find something that you actually enjoy doing every day, you'll be much more likely to stick with it.
So it's like just pulling words, out of my mouth, right? You talked a lot about, what I always refer to as the New Year's effect, right? We all know people have these goals usually around relationships, finances, and their health. Those are probably the three most common, resolutions. And so many people, I think, have a negative, perspective or perception of New Year's resolutions. It's not that that's bad, but it's like, to your point, you're going to go completely 180 degrees and make all these radical changes to your lifestyle when you're not habituated to that, right? And so even if you were that person who's like, I used to get up early and I used to go to the gym, you might be 40 pounds heavier. That might have been 10 years ago. And so if you're, like you said, going to quit drinking and doing all of these things that are systematically a part of your life, you're emotionally attached to that. You're psychologically attached to that, and you might not have that. And then there's the old adage, pressure doesn't create weakness, pressure reveals it, right? So you have life bring down whatever it is, whether it's wife, kids, work, medical, whatever, and then it just shoots through the roof. But I think the most astounding thing that you talked about was the why. And I think that people might be able to tell you what they want, right? Like, I want to get a bikini stitch. They might come to you and say, Kelly, help me with this nutrition program. My sister's wedding, and I want to look good in the dress, Or this person's like, I'm going back to my high school reunion. I want to look good. Or I don't want to cover up my shirt. Kelly, I play with my kids and my wife, and I want to finally be able to take my shirt off and enjoy the summer, right? And they have those things. And it's not that, like you said, that's bad. But the problem is when it comes to stress and they have a habituated, timeline for the last 6-7 years of just making that short-term decision that's made them feel better, you don't have that leverage. And so having something that's not only just really important, but knowing why it's important for you is going to be big. And so I really enjoy, you giving that little piece, because I think it's probably the number one thing that most people miss. It's absolutely the number one thing most people miss. So, good stuff there. Obviously, you had mentioned that you are a physical therapist. So talk to me a little bit about what kind of physical therapy you do and why you chose that specific demographic in physical therapy.
Yeah. So I think that's something that a lot of people probably don't know about me, but I've been working primarily with special needs children in a home health setting. So it's something I didn't necessarily think that I was going to do at a PT school, but kind of just had this opportunity. I've always loved kids. And so, having this opportunity to go into these people's homes and, work with these families has been something that's, been so rewarding and fulfilling to me. Like I, get to work with kids with Down syndrome and cerebral palsy and autism. And so it's very different than what you would typically think of as physical therapy. But I think it has given me such a renewed just perspective on how much, I love movement and how thankful I am to be able to wake up every day and exercise and do the things that I love, when a lot of these families and people that I work with are, maybe severely limited and will never be able to do those things. So work primarily in that setting. I also started my own small business in January this year. I'm also passionate about helping individuals in the orthopedic sports setting, which, most people are more familiar with. But that was a goal that I set for myself this year, is to start that business, and to really allow it to grow organically and to help people that really want my help. And I think that's ultimately what I've realized about myself is no matter the age, skill level, diagnosis, I don't really care what it is, as long as, those individuals actively seek my help and want to get better, want to take my advice, and just kind of value my time in general. But yeah, super, super rewarding overall.
Well, I think it's great. You talked a lot about you having this newfound appreciation for movement. And a lot of times, these developmental or, even neurological disorders that, we as people face with Down syndrome or whatever it actually is that hinders mobility or motor coordination. You are able to interact with those people every day, and being able to help them in itself is gratifying for them and for you. But it also, I can imagine, would trickle into your ability to go and push yourself. And, getting up in the morning and running at 4 a.m. is like, I don't want to do that. But it's like you have that ability, and where people would dream of that, at least one time you can go and do that. And so I like that you really talked about the passion sense and the gratitude. And you even mentioned one of your points from the last period about being fitness, finding something that's passion oriented. I have a client I work with, and he's a great guy. He, kills it in the gym. He's really addicted to the suffering thing. He's got that athlete bite in him, but he's a rock climber. He's an avid rock climber, and he loves it, and he talks about, top roping and all these different, agendas that he has and how he goes outside. And like, I think that that's his motivation. He loves training. He loves being fit, but he can slowly see himself increase. And that's all cultivated around passion. So you're definitely hitting on some huge things. And so we're almost done here, Kelly, but I do have a couple more questions and to be able to, kind of filter in. So the first thing that I want to talk about is something relevant to all of us here in really the world, but especially out here in the States. And that is this pandemic, this coronavirus, right? And so, here in Colorado, we're starting to open up things partially. My gym just opened back up, but we can only have, certain protocols in place. And so we're still not open near max capacity, but, we can start to see global or nationally that there's different states doing different things. Some gyms are open, some restaurants are open. And so this was quite the scare, right? And there's this huge emotional conflict, at least from my perspective, what I've seen on social media. And you have entrepreneurs and a lot of people, especially in the fitness community, who are really frustrated. They feel like fitness is a way of life and they support themselves and, they built these businesses. And now that was just completely taken away and there isn't a whole lot that they could do about it because the resources might not be there or whatever that is. So you could definitely be sympathetic or empathetic depending on your position with where they're coming from. And then you have individuals over here who, like my former general manager, lost his father to this. He got COVID and eventually ended up having a respiratory infection from pneumonia. And, there's how many cases of that and people who are potentially volatile candidates for contracting that. And so, kind of what's your take on when coronavirus hit and how, people can look at this in a silver lining as opposed to the negativity and the glass being half full instead of half empty?
Yeah, so, it's a tricky question. And I think, where it seems like where people are kind of very, divided on one side or the other, I kind of fall in the middle. I think that, depending on your circumstances, I respect that people are going to have different opinions based on that. I have been very fortunate to be able to continue working full time via telemedicine. So that's kind of my frame of reference. So I don't need to be out there. Yes, my small business isn't operating right now, but, I have an income. I'm, supported. So, I'm doing okay. So, I look at, for me personally, the risk of maybe my parents getting it, they're older. And so, that's, kind of where my focus has been, is trying to not, put them in even more risk than they already are. But I can't sit here and say that if I had, lost my job or had a business that wasn't functioning right now and I couldn't pay my bills or feed my kids, that I wouldn't be out there pressuring for things to open up faster. I think we just all need to, try to exhibit kindness and try to, shift our lens to, just being more open to, the fact that people are going through different things right now. People have different needs. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're trying to, be kind and respectful and do your part to mitigate the spread of this in whatever ways that you can, then, I, kind of support either way. Like I think it's good to get out there. When I think about the fact that a lot of, fast food restaurants are open, but gyms can't be open, you kind of do like, what are we really focusing on in this country?
Right. Right.
I full well understand why, maybe those bigger gyms like a 24-hour fitness or something are closed. Like, it's just, the risk is so high that it's really hard to justify. But when you look at some of these smaller businesses, like I know your gym or my CrossFit gym, I think that the chances of contracting something in a gym setting like that, if it's run correctly, are no more than, your trip to Lowe's or to, McDonald's or whatever it is. Like, there's risk in any of that. So I think it's just, yes, like I'm going to be the person that wears a mask out in public, to protect others. Because I think that's an easy step that we can all take to be respectful, try to keep our distance as much as possible. But, in doing so, also realize that, it's time to start slowly opening up and just try to be, as careful as we can. I mean, I don't really know what the answer is, but it seems like it's time to at least move forward a little bit.
I like it. I like it. You acknowledge, the sentiment of both settings. And I think that there's something to be said for people who are coming from both perspectives, right? Because you could be in a position where, again, you're really affected to this. And so then that becomes the tunnel's end for you, and you lose awareness with where somebody else might be feeling. And I think that's the valuable thing about the human condition. It doesn't matter when you're in the trench. It's always different when it's you. It's always different when it's you feel that way. Remember that there's hundreds of thousands and millions of people around the world who feel the same way you do. They might just have a different point of view. You're going to feel very different. So I like what you definitely touched on. And I think it was, obviously very, very thought out. So great stuff. Definitely a message to kind of take home there. We're almost out of time, but I wanted to get a chance to ask my last question. But before I do so, I want to take the time to acknowledge you. I want to take the time to acknowledge the incredible amount of hard work that you put in, Kelly. And again, for having that mindset of excellence in whatever it is that you do, and really trying to inspire people to understand that there is not a limitation, and you don't just use that as a message because you have a very high, social media, but you also live that. You live that with your life. You live that with what you're passionate about, and you're not looking for that validation. You're not looking for that or that message coming from other people about how a woman should look or what they should do. You really just, live for yourself and try to inspire others who are trying to do the exact same thing. I think it's, pretty damn cool, right? So I definitely want to acknowledge you for your time and coming on and being able to share that message.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Before I ask my last question, I want to get an opportunity. How can the members listening to this and whoever has the opportunity of wanting to know more about you or more about what it is you do, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so Instagram is usually the best place to find me. That's where most of my content goes. My handle is Kelstone35. Do have a Facebook page and a TikTok that I'm not too sure about at this point, but Instagram is a good place to find me.
Awesome. So here's my last question. If you have a world stage, right? So it's you and a microphone, and the world is listening. Every male, female, old, young, black, white, Asian, yellow, brown, in between are listening to you. And you had 1 minute. What would be your message that you would speak to the world?
Oh man, put me on I think, it's something I've actually been thinking a lot about lately. And, my big message is just that I think we all need to, spend a little bit more time focusing on the things that we're truly passionate about and, pursuing those passions despite what other people think. Like ultimately we have one life to live. You can spend it trying to seek validation from other people or do what you think is expected of you, or try to fit the mold of what your body type should be, or you can figure out what truly makes you happy. You can pursue the things that give you joy and that you feel passionate about, and that, ways that you can positively impact the world. And ultimately, your actions and what drives you should be, what makes you happy. Like what, at the end of the day, are you going to look back and 90, when you're 90 years old and say, oh, I'm so glad that I, listened to that person and behaved myself and got the degree I was supposed to? Or did I live my life to the fullest and positively impact this world? And, am I proud of the things that I've done? So don't look for validation from anybody else. Be happy and keep moving forward one step at a time.
I like it. Do you. That's the take-home message. Well, again, listen, Kelly, it's been the biggest pleasure having you on and listening to your answers, your story, and ultimately your message, your true inspiration for athletes, but also individuals all around. So hopefully your message is not just romantic or aesthetic entertainment to the ears, but definitely something that people can put into place. So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. That was awesome.
Everyone, this has been a profound message coming to you from myself on NattFitness Method. We hope that you definitely are able to connect with the message today and figure out a way that you can actually apply these to your life. And if you have any questions, we are just inbox away. Please help out this podcast by going to Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play Music and giving us a rate and review. That will allow us to continue to serve you and deliver more valuable information. Till next time, my friends, this is Nicholas Natt signing off.